Double bump, double bump. Thank you. Thank you, Wouter. Thank you, Jess. What an amazing presentation. That was really cool looking. At the very first conference almost a decade ago, we coined the phrase, vote with your code. And it's sort of served as a battle cry or rally cry for RDK, for everybody to join in and participate and be accounted for. Be proud to be an RDK member. Opportunity to submit code is still very much part of our ethos, our core, with thousands of contributions happening each month. The scope of what RDK is has grown over the years, as you guys are seeing here today. But to expand what operators can do with RDK, whether they're large or small, and how our global community compares with others in various other industries, I'll now invite to the stage Nitin Pai, the CMO and Chief Strategy Officer at Tata Elxsi, one of our RTAB members. Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Okay. Yep.
Good afternoon. First of all, it's fantastic to be back at IBC, right? We missed 2020. 2021 was canceled a week before. And it's finally really good to be back here, meeting friends. Some of them are customers, some partners, hopefully some would-be customers too, right? So with that, when I was talking to Jason and the team about where is RDK going and where do we see the next 5 years, 10 years, I was looking at the point that, yeah, you reached a milestone of 100 million. And it's wonderful to now go after the billion. But that billion has to come from partly organic growth of each of the adoptees right now, and they're building up subscribers, their ability to win market share, and of course, you need new adoptees. So how does that journey look like? So for that, I kind of went back to my roots. So 30 years back, I was a motorcycle designer. I designed motorcycles for the #2 company in the world, right? Fast bikes, but the development process was not fast enough. That's a different matter. And I'm picking up a little bit from the learnings that we've had of a similar movement, if I may call it, a similar community that was initiated in the automotive industry, right? So I'm going to shift context now. And if you look at what's common between all of this, and you'll find some of the finest brands there. You'll find a BMW 7 Series, a S-Class, a Volvo, a Volkswagen. You'll find a Tata Motors there, which is just a 5 lakh rupees. It's less than a $10,000 car there. And you'll find vehicles that are outside of the passenger car domain, including trucks, including off-road vehicles, and so on. And it's a very interesting conundrum, right? Why? Because if you think of how automotive electronics and technology has developed, it has had the same challenges. You have built it feature by feature. You have anywhere between 3 electronic control units to about a 60 or a 70 for a S-Class, each of them doing their own bit, almost like your devices in the home, all coming together to create an experience, right? Each of them are black boxes. And the problem that you have with innovation is that as an OEM, and the OEM, remember, is the apex of that pyramid before it gets to the consumer, just as much as operators are the apex before you get to the consumer finally. You have this issue of how do I deliver innovation when what I'm doing is really defining features, defining roadmap, but then I'm getting a supplier to supply it. When I move from model year to model year, I'll have to go stand in queue to request for changes. If I want differentiation, I pay top dollar. And I'm not very sure that the differentiation is going to be retained with me. It's most likely going to be democratized out by the supplier, right? And how do I keep that pipeline going? How do I optimize between brands? So one is to say, look, I have Jaguar Land Rover, I have the Defender brand there, I have the Land Rover brand there, I have the Discovery there. How do I optimize across the range? But how do I also optimize across brands? What I'm trying to do is to appeal to your own challenges as you look at your markets, your devices, and your journeys, right? And what actually resulted was a very interesting thing, a consortium that was founded in 2003 that brought 3 companies together, Daimler, BMW, and Volkswagen, founding members. And what is the idea? You can look at the stack. You'll find that it's fairly similar in terms of what it's seeking to do, to abstract hardware, first of all, from software, to build a middleware that is common and standardized, And then to be able to build business logic and innovation on top, that is yours. And the idea was to now create a common foundation that allowed you to find suppliers to modularize, to reassemble or disassemble in different ways the ECUs that you would have in a car, and therefore control experience. Much more easier said than done, right? The idea was, of course, to pave the way for all the good things that RDK stands for: innovation, agility, the ability to control your future, and so on and so forth. And the real journey beyond that 2003 is very interesting. It right now stands at about 350 members, a very wide ecosystem, ranging from the core partners you had, and please observe, you'll find that there is representation from every continent, if you may. You had a Toyota, you had a General Motors, you had a Ford, apart from the big three Germans. And then you have a couple of suppliers too, who form the foundation. And then you have a whole set of members below that contribute. Equally, what is interesting is where it has got to now. 31 of the world's best OEMs, 21 of the top 22, 80% of all global vehicles now feature AUTOSAR, not necessarily across the board. This is somewhat like saying there would be RDK in every single device in the home. Not necessary. You would start your journey somewhere, right? But that's the kind of scale it has got to. And it's expanding. Equally, if you look at membership, some interesting learnings here too. Look at the path. You started off in 2003 with 10 members. You kind of grew fairly rapidly after that, exponentially, if I may call it that, right up to 2009. What happens in 2009? Suddenly, there is a whole set of people who are wondering, is AUTOSAR really for the world? Is it meant for the entire automotive industry? Or is this some nefarious plan from the BMWs, the Mercedes-Benzes, and the Volkswagens to corner what would be innovation? So you start to doubt the intent of the organization. You equally have considerations about, look, we are from Japan. We form a primary market here which is quite different. So you suddenly had an AUTOSAR which was Japanese flavored, JSAR. You had a Chinese flavored AUTOSAR, CSAR, right? And what you're doing is you're fundamentally fragmenting what is meant to be a common movement. And you'll find that it floundered for a set of years before it picked up again. And I would actually lean to the foresight of the RDKM team that one of the things that they've done is to host conferences in different parts of the world. Because that is exactly the route that the AUTOSAR community went on to. It hosted a conference in Tokyo, saying, look, we are for you too. A conference in China, in Shanghai, saying we are for you too. One in Detroit. So the idea was not to get to the founding body and the founding place, where it was in Germany, but to actually make sure that AUTOSAR goes to where your customers are going to be, your adoptees are going to be. For me, that's a fantastic learning, right? Of a journey of what you get for adoption. Of course, there's a lot of money now being spent. There's a lot of acceleration that's happening, especially as you get to autonomous, connected electric vehicles. The car is going to become one single computer in some sense. A service-oriented architecture that's capable of processing independently inside, doing a lot more on the cloud, talking between the two. I find so many correlations to what we see with the RDK and what's happening with the operator world, right? So what's driving this democratization? Inclusion. I think the point being simple. How does something like this apply not just to the big guys, not to the companies that have multiple brands, millions of sales, multiple countries that they sell in? How does it apply as much to a regional operator or a regional brand? I only have maybe about 500,000 cars that I sell. I sell primarily in only these 2-3 geographies. That's my limit. Does that apply to me? Does it make sense for me? Does it make sense to a company that has only one brand versus a company that has multiple brands? So I think we've gone through that journey of inclusion. Innovation and agility, it's proved without doubt. You now have the same continuous development cycles, features that are being built model year to model year that are driven by the fact that you have a common foundation. TCO impact, and that's why I don't call it cost impact, because per ECU is not cheaper. The cost of the system is cheaper. The cost of owning it across years and across brands and the reuse that you get is what makes it cheaper. Economies of scale, of course. 90 million cars sold annually, but please remember, it's not the number of cars. It's the number of ECUs multiplied by the number of cars. So you're technically talking about anywhere between 2 to 3 billion electronic control units that you're actually targeting for adoption. And that's the volume that you're talking of. right? RDK for me is on the same path. Of course, for the inability to put a whole many logos here, I've just put a few. That's my limitation of PowerPoint, but you find that it is now cutting across geographies. You're finding that it is going from the very large multi-country operators to also very specialized regional leaders. So a New Day, a Nosh, a BCN in India, right? He's one small operator sitting in one small part of India trying to compete against an Airtel and a Reliance Jio. Gorillas in the room, if I may, right? And you have somebody like that who is able to make a decision on saying, look, RDK does make sense for us, right? And that's a wonderful sign. The second, and again, I'm looking at it from the context of automotive, you cannot be relevant only to one element of the car. You can't be only connected. You can't be only autonomous. Equally, you find this proliferation of devices. You find this proliferation of transport technologies. All good things. Why? Because this is what creates inclusion. This is what makes it relevant for any context, for any operator. And I think that is important. And the fact that it's not just Comcast, but Deutsche Telekom and others who are taking the lead and making sure they walk the path first, make sure that it's tried and tested, and allow that to be now adopted and used by others, fantastic. I'm now moving to consumer behavior. I told you I was a designer. So the first thing that we start with is consumers. What do consumers want? What business wants comes second. And for me, especially in the context of operators, it's been 5 C's. Content first. And if you look at a market like India, I've seen LATAM, I've seen Asia Pacific across regions, of course. It has to be regional and international content. I can watch Netflix and Amazon only for so long. I need to have those channels that I need. I need to have VOD, I need to have live. I need to have choice. Customer experience is a nuanced word. There are multiple meanings to it. In some sense, I will lean back to what Pedro said, the ability for consumers not to have to call. Not because there is AI working, not because there's proactive monitoring and diagnostics. Yeah, those are good things. It's a simple fact that you can make it simple enough for them to know what's wrong and solve it themselves. Start with that, right? Fast and reliable Wi-Fi, of course. Convenience, triple play, aggregated services. Cost comes last. Sometimes we start with the equation of cost. Look, India, Asia Pacific, LATAM, ARPU, can't manage innovation, can't drive innovation. I think that comes last. If you can manage the first 4, you'll find that you're able to address the last one, right? And I think when I look at it from operator priorities, of course, churn, number 1. Improving ARPU through differentiation, of course. Reducing your total cost of ownership as you go around time. Being agile, because you're living in a market which is quite dynamic. Value-added services, leveraging data, ensuring compliance. I mean, you folks know your priorities, right? And I think in that context, having been with so many customers in their journeys, having been with so many operators who've tried different things, we definitely see RDK enabling that foundation, without question, right? Tried and tested MVP, accelerator programs, and platforms, qualification test suites, all these enabled, along with the platforms that you get, the power of open source, the fact that there's an active community that's contributing, wonderful. The power of data, diagnostics, usage patterns, I think all good things, right? But when I look at an operator, it's not just the RDK stack that makes it happen, right? Ultimately, what you're doing is you're setting up a factory, you're setting up an environment, you're setting up yourself for a transformation journey that goes beyond just the foundation. And that is where I think a lot of questions come up in terms of what is the fundamental strategy that we're driving against? What is the strategy for differentiation? How do I use the foundation to make sure my base is right, but how do I deliver on top of this? Right? And you'll find that there are things that you need to put in place that go just beyond the box at the bottom. And it's not just putting it right once, making sure that it works and works and works as you scale. Right? And that is where I think a lot of the conversations that we're having with many operators who are considering RDK, evaluating RDK, assessing RDK, seem to be at. The fact that there's a whole set of things that you'll have to do more or for the first time, or better. Your whole product management strategy, right? In terms of how do I manage, how many platforms do I run? How do I manage my roadmap there? What makes a good starting point for me? How do I keep up the roadmap? How do I make sure that the platform delivers? Program management, for the first time you'll find that instead of having a supplier take away specs and then come back on a given date and so on, you are now driving a lot of things yourself in terms of stakeholders. Data and insights and action. It's one thing to be enabled with data, the other is to leverage it. How does it impact customer care? What does it do for ops? What does it do for your fundamental roadmap itself? Right? I think there is a journey that you'll undertake that starts to deliver value, but you'll have to extract that value, right? Post-deployment and engineering, of course. Capacity as well as capability. I do remember there are 1 or 2 questions on what's the kind of teams that you need and what's the scale and size of teams that you need. I think that's an aspect too, right? I think the good thing that I can assure folks who are looking at RDK, of course, is that I think as a community, we are all deeply invested in your success, right? So whether it's our enablers that are provided, accelerated platforms, pre-integrated apps, optimized RDK, automatics, and there's more, I'm sure, on the cards. There's a whole ecosystem behind you, whether it's silicon vendors, whether it's OEMs, who are investing more and more to make sure that what we deliver is better, faster, more integrated. Third-party solution providers, and we're seeing a whole set of them come on board. SI partners like us, right? And I think the one thing that we can assure you is, again, having been on this journey for many years, having worked with all the operators who started on the RDK journey, I think there are deep lessons that we bring, that we've distilled, some of it packaged into methodologies, some of it packaged into solutions and products that go beyond what you would be enabled from the community, that simply make sure that when you're starting your factory, you're starting at a point that gets you to action and results, right? And that is where I would leave you with. I'm just going to take, I know I have 8 minutes, so I'm going to take 1 minute to talk about it. An application development or a deployment platform for gateways, where you have the ability now to sit on top and, as an operator, drive the app deployment and so on and so forth. You have ICX, which is the tool that delivers telemetry, remote management, and remote monitoring of devices. Simply a tool that has to be available to operations and customer care, but really to business and marketing as much, right? You have T-Play, which is our OTT platform that we now have deployed at multiple customers. It's a backend for OTT. Again, I'm just telling you assets that are available that, as required, can be leveraged. Again, Quotient, something that is now being used by Sky for a long time now, Comcast, Nosh, Dish TV, delivering automated testing, but more importantly, quality of experience as defined in streaming video, right? So I think there are a whole set of assets that we have invested into that are available as required, as relevant, that are essentially here to make sure that your journey is not just faster, but more fruitful, right? I have slides, but we also have a stall outside. We are present too. So I'm not going to bother you with complex diagrams here about what we bring. You can be rest assured that we have distilled all the learnings and bring proven, tested solutions and capabilities that will make sure that your journey is set right? Including DevOps and so on. So I'm going to stop here. By the way, the gentleman on the screen is Ratan Tata, 5th generation Tata. The Tatas are about 150 years old as an organization, about 120 billion now. We are just one company within that large Tata business. He has this wonderful saying, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, walk together. For me, I think the RDK community represents that. But of course, we have one lesson to tell Mr. Tata too, that when you get the power of a community, the investments that a community makes and open source together, you can not only walk far, but you can walk pretty fast too, right? So with that, I'm done. I'm just going to leave you with the last insight / question, right? Again, picking up from my automotive experience, You look at the car, and AutoSAR applies to everything in the car except infotainment. Infotainment is a non-real-time system. Everything else is a mission-critical real-time system. In the cluster of a car, there are telltales and diagnostics that is mission-critical. So that is covered by AutoSAR. Everything else in infotainment is an open book, fundamentally Linux-based. So here's an opportunity for RDKV to get into the car via the infotainment OS, if I may call it that, right? So if any of you folks are interested, we have some brilliant ideas about that.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. You know, I do want to put into the suggestion box RDKZ, if you're interested, for some lettering. I've been trying to make that a thing. So thank you very much, Nitin, for speaking. It's just amazing slideware. Just gives you a little bit of thought in terms of where RDK is going, where RDK is headed, how to think about RDK, and how to think about services on top, and really to enhance the customer experience. Again, messaging RDK is an enabler to create a differentiating experience on top of the platform.